The Japanese called her Kiri no Shōtai, the Grey Ghost. She'd haunted them across every campaign since Pearl Harbor, striking hard and vanishing before they could finish her. But in late October 1942, during the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, they finally had her in their sights. Bombs screamed down from Aichi D3A dive bombers and slammed into her rear deck. Explosions split the sky. Aboard the carrier Shōkaku, sailors erupted in triumph. After so many near misses, it struck her, twice. The ghost ship was burning. Dive bombers banked away, convinced they'd finally buried the legend beneath the waves. Then the smoke shifted. Gasps replaced cheers. Through the haze, a silhouette began to stir. The Japanese pilots circled back, sure their eyes were deceiving them. The Grey Ghost had returned. She was born into a world that didn't yet realize how much it needed her. On the morning of October 3rd, 1936, at Newport News Shipbuilding, USS Enterprise was launched after years of assembly. Her hull, built with handle-lined bulkheads, welded frames, and braced steel, was crafted by experienced shipbuilders. Then, with 19,800 tons of steel and purpose behind her, the ship slid down into the James River. A new warship had entered the world. Her name was Enterprise. She was the 7th U.S. Navy vessel to bear the name, but the first built for a war not yet declared. Designated CV-6, she was the second of the Yorktown-class fleet carriers. Unlike earlier experimental carriers, like Langley or Lexington, these were purpose-built warships, 809 feet long, steel, and engineered to take the Pacific in stride. At her helm stood Captain Newton H. White, a veteran of the Great War and early naval aviation. He'd flown biplanes off converted cruisers. Now he commanded one of the most advanced ships in the Navy. Tall, trim, and known for saying little, White walked her decks like a man learning a new language, studying drills, observing catapult tests, listening to the hum of machinery as elevators lifted aircraft topside. She shadowed fleet maneuvers off Panama, sailed to the Caribbean, and by 1938 was anchored at Pearl Harbor, a quiet naval base still largely unknown to the wider American public. Japan had taken Manchuria, and Hitler preached expansion. While Congress stayed quiet, the Navy moved. Enterprise trained nonstop. Her fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo planes practiced launching, striking, and recovering. History was racing ahead, and the Enterprise was already on the move. By the early hours of December 7th, 1941, Enterprise was racing through the Pacific, 215 nautical miles from Pearl Harbor. Storms near Wake Island had delayed her return, keeping her just out of range when the attack began. She tore through open water, 9 Babcock and Wilcox boilers feeding her Parsons turbines with superheated fury. Over 120,000 shaft horsepower hurled her forward at 32.5 knots, faster than most cruisers, racing to reach the fight before it reached her. On her flight deck, nearly 800 feet long, dauntless dive bombers were being prepped for launch. Her 3 hydraulic elevators lifted aircraft from the cavernous hangar. Shortly after the initial Japanese attack began at Pearl Harbor, 18 SBD Dauntlesses lifted off in pairs, heading into a sky filled with battleships ablaze, oil fires raging, and flak bursting overhead. Caught between attacking Japanese planes and frantic American anti-aircraft fire, the dive bombers faced danger from both friend and foe. 7 aircraft were shot down, and 8 airmen were lost. Though still 200 miles from Oahu, the war had already found her. That evening, acting on a false report of a Japanese carrier to the southwest, Enterprise launched a twilight strike. 6 Wildcats from VF-6, 18 Devastators from VT-6, and 6 Dauntlesses from VB-6. The bombers found nothing and returned, and the fighters were diverted to Hickam Field in Oahu. Despite warnings sent ahead, their sudden arrival in the dark sky spread panic. Anti-aircraft guns opened up, shooting down 3 of the 6. A 4th Wildcat ran out of fuel, its pilot bailing out into the night. Despite the chaos, Enterprise pulled into Pearl Harbor on the evening of December 8th for urgent refueling and resupply. Vice Admiral William Halsey Jr., commanding Carrier Division 2, ordered every able-bodied sailor to aid in rearming the ship. What normally took 24 hours was accomplished in just 7. Before dawn, Enterprise and Task Force 8 were underway again, patrolling Hawaiian waters as her rare CX-AM-1 radar scanned for bombers or subs. 3 days later, a Dauntless from Enterprise's air group spotted Japanese submarine I-70. It dove too late. Bombs struck with precision, and the sub erupted in flames, becoming the first confirmed Japanese vessel sunk by U.S. forces in the Pacific War. In that first week, Enterprise became something more than a warship. She became the tip of the spear. Engines roared as Enterprise sliced through Pacific Whitecaps, flanking her newly commissioned sister, Hornet, which carried 16 Army B-25 bombers bound for Tokyo. Land-based and never meant for carrier launch, these planes had one mission: bomb Tokyo, vanish into China, no return. Enterprise couldn't carry them herself, so she was tasked with protecting them. Since Pearl Harbor, she'd changed, refitted with anti-torpedo blisters and hardened steel. On April 18, 1942, at 3:45 a.m., her once experimental CX-AM-1 radar flared. Japanese picket boats ahead. Halsey didn't hesitate. He gave the order, quote, "Launch the bombers." The sea churned as the first Mitchell rolled forward. Engines strained, and one by one, though overloaded and stripped of guns, they launched. Their message was clear: America can reach you. However, this came at a price. Some crews crash-landed in China or near Vladivostok. 14 evaded capture. One crew escaped Soviet internment via Iran. 8 were caught, 3 executed after sham trials. Headlines blared: Tokyo bombed. Morale soared. Rear Admiral Raymond Spruant stood on the flag bridge, eyes on the horizon, dispatches in hand. Behind him, Enterprise surged forward. 5 days earlier, they'd missed the Battle of the Coral Sea. Now they raced towards something bigger. Spruant hadn't expected to command. Halsey, worn down by stress and illness, was out. Spruant, calm and calculating, stepped in. Enterprise was now the flagship of Task Force 16. Her deck bristled with Wildcats and Dauntlesses. Below, hangars pulsed with activity. They had clear orders, quote, "Hold Midway and inflict maximum damage on the enemy by strong attrition tactics. If they failed here, there might not be another chance." At dawn on June 4th, Japanese carriers launched an attack on Midway. They thought they had the element of surprise. They didn't know Spruance was already closing in on them. VT-6 launched low from Enterprise, skimming waves into a wall of enemy fire. One by one, they made their runs. No hits. Smoke trailing, a few survivors returned. Spruant stepped out and counted tails. Not enough. Whole crews had been lost. Then came the second wave. Dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown peeled out, flames erupting over Akagi and Kaga as fuel tanks exploded and aircraft burned on deck. Yorktown squadron struck Soryu, which vanished in fire. Fleet carrier Hiryu struck back. Spruance watched as enemy planes hit Yorktown. Bombs tore decks. Torpedoes broke her spine. Smoke rose as she slowed, badly damaged. Spruance responded immediately. That afternoon, Enterprise's squadrons located the carrier Hiryu and scored 4 devastating hits through thick flak and cloud cover. She burned until nightfall. The next day, Dauntless dive bombers intercepted the retreating cruiser Mikuma. She didn't make it far. When the battle ended, 4 Japanese carriers were sunk, 1 cruiser destroyed, and over 270 aircraft lost, along with their elite crews. Through it all, Enterprise remained untouched by bombs, but her deck told the story. Scorched landing gear, streaks of oil and hydraulic fluid, and too many empty seats. On June 13th, they returned to Pearl Harbor. Midway had been a gamble. Enterprise had rolled the dice and carved the enemy in half. Captain Arthur C. Davis took over on June 30th, after weeks in Pearl Harbor repairing and rearming the battle-hardened ship. On July 15th, 1942, Enterprise sailed south with Task Force 61 to hold Guadalcanal and stop Japan's advance. The enemy's strike group, Shōkaku, Zoikaku, and Ryujo, carried veterans from Pearl Harbor and Coral Sea, aiming to crush the Marines and silence Henderson Field. Enterprise opened fire with her 5-inch .38s and 50 caliber Brownings, her guns thundering as her air group launched at dawn on August 24th. Ryujo sank, Chitose burned, and Japanese transports broke formation. The counterattack was fierce. Shortly after noon, dive bombers tore through the clouds. 3 bombs hit Enterprise. 1 detonated deep in the aft elevator shaft. 4 more exploded nearby, ripping steel and shaking the ship. 74 men perished instantly. 95 were wounded. Captain Davis held firm on the bridge. Damage crews fought flames and sealed breaches. By nightfall, Enterprise limped east, wounded yet unbroken. Admiral Halsey called it a tactical victory. Enterprise had taken the brunt of the attack and bought precious time. Henderson Field remained operational. The Marines held fast, and momentum was shifting. Less than a month later, the war-weary carrier would face her next trial. Santa Cruz was a brutal reminder that the war was far from over. Captain Osborne Hardison had only just assumed command when 2 bombs slammed into Enterprise, tearing through her decks. 44 lives were lost, 75 men lay wounded. Nearby, Hornet took even worse punishment and was lost. Enterprise took on her squadrons and survivors. Her decks were overcrowded, her hull low in the water. Bruised, burning, and unyielding, she fought on. She was now the last operational U.S. fleet carrier in the Pacific. In a bold display of pride, someone nailed a sign to her deck: Enterprise versus Japan. On October 30th, she limped into Noumea, and repairs began at once. With Japan regrouping in the Solomons, there was no time to wait. On November 11th, despite still being under repair, Enterprise set out again. 75 Seabees from Company B, 3rd Construction Battalion, alongside technicians from USS Vestal under Lieutenant Commander Herschel Smith, worked non-stop while the ship steamed toward battle. Sparks flew, tools rang, scouts launched. She wasn't ready, but she was needed. Enterprise struck back in mid-November as TBF Avengers damaged the battleship Hiei, which was later scuttled. The following day, dauntless dive bombers set the cruiser Kinugasa ablaze, sinking her. Within days, a total of 16 Japanese ships had been sunk, and 8 more were heavily damaged. Afterwards, Enterprise was sent to Noumea once again to get her hull patched. There was no pause. She quickly set sail again, escorting convoys, shielding task forces, constantly on the move. Off Rennell Island, her fighters met incoming bombers head-on. Though many attackers were driven off, some managed to break through the defenses. As a result, the heavy cruiser USS Chicago took critical damage from torpedoes and was ultimately lost. Detached after the battle, Enterprise arrived at Espiritu Santo on February 1st, where she spent the next 3 months supporting U.S. surface forces through the Solomons. Not long after, Admiral Chester Nimitz came aboard. Sailors stood shoulder to shoulder as he handed over the first presidential unit citation ever awarded to a carrier. That summer, fresh Essex and Independence-class carriers joined the fleet. Long overdue for rest, Enterprise entered Puget Sound for an overhaul. Since Pearl Harbor, she had carried the war, Midway, Santa Cruz, each fight etched into her history. Japan had declared her sunk more than once, and yet she always came back, like a gray ghost that refused to fade. Enemy reports often spoke too soon. Enterprise didn't just survive, she adapted. Each battle sharpened her edge, each repair made her more lethal. Now she was being reforged. Steelworkers welded broad anti-torpedo blisters to her hull, widening her frame for better undersea protection. Out went the old 1.1-inch guns. In came twin and quad 40mm Beaufort guns, faster and more accurate. Radar arrays bristled from upgraded masts. Her paint changed too. Gone was haze gray. In its place, dazzle camouflage, jagged arcs of blue, black, and white, meant to splinter her silhouette and confound enemy rangefinders. At sea level, she became an illusion. Enterprise emerged as the first U.S. carrier fully outfitted for night warfare. Her electrical systems were rebuilt for darkness. Red-lit hangars, low-signal radios, moonlight drills, and hand-lamped signals became the new rhythm. Her logbook gained a new designation, N for night. When she sailed from Puget Sound in late 1943, she wasn't just repaired, she was transformed. The Philippines burned with the fire of return in October 1944. USS forces surged towards Leyte, shielded by steel and flame. Across Japanese commands, one name echoed with dread: Enterprise. She was back. As Japan prepared its counterattack, Enterprise moved like a phantom at the edge of vision, low in the water, cloaked in dazzle and smoke. By day, her squadrons tore through landing zones, gun nests, and convoys. At night, she became something worse. While other carriers went dark, Enterprise lit the sky. Her black-painted night squadrons flew without radios or flares, only red lens lamps and hand signals. Airfields vanished before dawn. Convoys exploded without warning. Even veteran Japanese pilots feared the dark, whispering of ghost fighters and silent bombers. Then came October 24th. The Imperial Navy threw everything it had. Bombers swarmed toward the U.S. task force. Sirens wailed. Flak filled the sky. Enterprise's guns roared. 5-inch turrets and rapid-fire cannons shredding plane after plane. Some still broke through. A nearby destroyer vanished in flames. Enterprise took no direct hits, but near misses shook her to the keel. Still, she was launching aircraft again by afternoon. Over the Sibuyan Sea, 9 Helldivers found Musashi. Their 1,000-pound bombs ripped her apart. Elsewhere, Enterprise's air wing battered Yamashiro and Fuso, crippling systems and forcing retreats. That night, the Surigao Strait became a battleground. U.S. battleships and destroyers ambushed the damaged Japanese fleet with torpedoes and broadsides. Fire consumed their hulls. Enterprise watched from the waters off Leyte and Samar. Her night crews stalked retreating ships. Her fighters shielded the beachheads. Her name swept the fleet like a battle cry. By battle's end, the Imperial Navy was shattered. At the turn of 1945, Enterprise was no stranger to fire. Her frame bore cracked decks, torn elevators, and the scars of a dozen battles, but she had never turned away. When the Marines stormed Iwo Jima in February, Enterprise was already moving. Her engines thrummed, her air group ready. Just over the horizon, deck crews launched wave after wave. Wildcats, Hellcats, Dauntlesses, Avengers, into the volcanic sky. She struck from every angle. The island's jagged ridges offered little cover, yet the Japanese had carved a fortress into the rock. Bombers cratered gun nests and sealed cave mouths. Fighters intercepted enemy planes. By night, Hellcats flew low under starlight, igniting the haze with fire. Every few minutes, a catapult thundered. Launch, recover, repeat. Enterprise operated with the precision of veterans who knew what was at stake. She didn't just support the assault. She suppressed, shielded, and strangled it from above. Iwo Jima would fall, and she would help bring it down. And still, there was no rest. Heading into April, Enterprise turned north towards Okinawa, Japan's last major defense before the mainland. Tens of thousands of Allied troops prepared to storm the island. Thousands more waited to stop them. Wave after wave of kamikazes fell, not as pilots, acting instead as weapons, determined to take anything with them. Enterprise, scarred by nearly every major Pacific campaign, stood at the front again. The Navy's most decorated warship, and a prime target. On April 11th, the sky split with the scream of a diving plane. A lone bomber dodged flak and smoke, slamming into her forward elevator. The blast buckled the deck, fire and shrapnel tearing through the hull. Men vanished. Others were hurled into bulkheads. Below, the hangar deck ignited. Ammunition exploded, compartments filled with choking smoke. Damage control surged forward. Some had served since Leyte, others since Midway. None hesitated. They fought with hoses, axes, bare hands, clearing wreckage, sealing ruptures, and carving escape paths. By sundown, despite a scorched deck, planes were flying again. The ghost endured. Then came May 14th. Another kamikaze pierced the clouds, skimmed the waves, and struck nearly the same spot. The blast was worse. Steel peeled in molten sheets. Fire tore through the hangar. Workstations, aircraft, lives, gone in seconds. 14 sailors were lost, some never found. Others vanished, pulling friends from the flames. The explosion gutted her forward third. The elevator was obliterated. Deck plates caved. The air reeked of scorched paint and silence. This time, even Enterprise couldn't walk it off. She still didn't sink. Deck crews trucked launch lines onto warped steel. Welders worked through the ship's sway. Planes still launched, some with half a runway. The Ghost pressed on, bruised yet breathing. She flew sorties, ran patrols, struck targets until the last light. But the final blow had landed. The May 14th hit sealed her fate. After years of fire and fury, this wound ran too deep. As Okinawa raged behind her, Enterprise was forced to turn east. Restored to peak condition after years of brutal combat, the Enterprise took on one final mission, bringing America's warriors home. No longer a carrier of bombers, she now carried something far more precious, men who had survived the war and were ready to step back into civilian life. In September 1945, she arrived at Pearl Harbor and embarked 1,141 servicemen, including hospital patients and former POWs, then sailed for New York by way of the Panama Canal. When she passed under the Brooklyn Bridge on October 17th, she was greeted by the cheers of a nation. After a brief stay, Enterprise steamed to Boston for modifications. More bunks, more birds, preparing her for the largest troop repatriation effort in history, Operation Magic Carpet. Her first voyage to Europe came in November. From Southampton, she returned 4,668 servicemen, stacked deck to deck in makeshift hammocks and crowded mess halls. On her second run, she received a rare honor. British First Lord of the Admiralty, Sir Albert Alexander, came aboard to present Enterprise with a Royal Navy pennant, a symbol of respect flown only when the highest Admiralty officers were present. No other American ship received one. That second trip home, though, tested her. Across 9 days, Enterprise battled 4 vicious storms, some with hurricane-force winds. Waves towered 75 feet high, crashing over the bow, flooding the forecastle deck 10 feet deep. Yet she stayed on course, delivering 4,413 men safely to New York on Christmas Day. Her final voyage took her to the Azores. On January 17, 1946, she returned with 3,557 personnel, including 212 Women's Army Corps members. Enterprise had sailed into war again and again. Now she sailed into peace. Her decks, once having launched fighters, now welcomed home survivors. When news broke in the late 1950s that Enterprise was headed for the scrapyard, it sent a tremor through the nation. She had survived bombs, torpedoes, kamikazes, and the chaos of war, only to be dismantled in peace. Veterans who had fought on her decks or returned home in her hangars led the outcry. Civic groups and historians urged the Navy to reconsider. Editorials ran in local papers. Letters arrived at the Navy Department asking whether a ship with 20 battle stars deserved the indignity of rust and salvage. Some pushed for her preservation as a museum or memorial. A few communities offered waterfront sites, but preservation was too expensive. Years of war had taken their toll. Her hull needed extensive repairs. Her systems were outdated. Her steel had endured storms of fire, yet in 1958, it was steel prices that sealed her fate. The Grey Ghost vanished, not in battle, but beneath the glow of a welder's torch. A promise was even made to preserve her distinctive tripod mast for installation at the U.S. Naval Academy's new football stadium. That promise was never kept. The mast was lost to time. Only a memorial plaque remains at the base of what is still known as Enterprise Tower. In 1961, her name rose again, this time in nuclear fire. USS Enterprise, CVN-65, the world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, took to the seas as a warship for a new age. She had no wooden decks or canvas planes, but her soul endured. CV-6's portholes were installed in her captain's quarters. Her tactics, coordinated carrier air groups, and radar-guided defenses became the blueprint of modern naval warfare. Today, nothing remains of Enterprise but pieces scattered in museums, a few photos, and her name on newer ships. The carrier that outlasted bombs, torpedoes, and kamikazes left no grave, just a record of victories that reshaped naval warfare.